found yourself stuck in a tangle of indecision, wondering if you're about to make the wrong choice or questioning whether you can trust your inner desires at all? You're not alone. Choice is one of the most highly charged aspects of personal power, and that doesn't always come from knowing what you want. It comes from cultivating clarity and honoring the energy moving through and behind your decisions. So in this video, we're going to explore the energetic structure of choice, what alignment really means, and how to spot the difference between choosing to avoid what you don't want and choosing to move closer to what you do want, and how to move forward even when you feel uncertain and don't like any of the choices before you, right? If you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. And if you'd like to go deeper, please check out the various ways that you can work with me in the description box below. The subject of choice making isn't just intellectually complex, it's emotionally and existentially charged, right? Especially for someone who has lived through deep karmic entanglements, power dynamics, and the heavy psychological task of reclaiming inner authority. It might feel fraught because your personal agency has been hard won. So the idea of making another wrong choice can feel loaded or even threatening. You might be deeply aware that consciousness is not linear, and so choosing in a dualistic sense can feel like it misses the greater unfolding. There may still be tenderness or grief around times you did feel certain and chose with your whole heart and still faced pain and challenging consequences, disappointment or disillusionment. You're probably wise enough to know that everything happens for a reason. Doesn't sugarcoat or silver line unnecessary difficulty, resulting harm or bypassing responsibility. And you don't want to inadvertently perpetuate any of that, right? So let's explore how all choices teach, guide, and reorient us, and how to reclaim grace in the process. How, although fear of mistakes can freeze us, life still meets us wherever we are and supports our higher unfolding, and how we can navigate this terrain by honing our attention to inner discernment and feeling energy and perceived notions of perfection or succumbing to external pressure. Because what is choice really, right? A choice isn't just a mental decision, it's an exercise in selective attention and energetic alignment. Every time you choose, you shift your field and you cast a vote for a particular version of reality, right? And not all choices come from the same inner source. So sometimes the confusion isn't just what to choose, it's where in your being the choice is being made from. I've noticed several different energetic types of choice that I've seen over and over again in myself and in my clients and just in general. So first, there are reactive choices. These come from fear, urgency, anxiety, or avoidance. You're trying to escape discomfort, avoid what you don't want, reacting to a situation or circumstance on the fly. And quite often, these can also be programmed choices, right? These kinds of choices arise from conditioning, familial, karmic, societal. You choose what is expected. It feels familiar. I've always done it this way, so I'll stick with what works or gets expected or familiar, sure thing results. So it doesn't seem too risky. Or you wait too long, put off making the choice until the choice ends up being made for you by others or the forward momentum of life itself. Or, maybe the option gets taken off the table, right? Then there are aligned choices. These come from clarity and flow and inner connection. They may still feel hard, but they carry a sense of clean direction, like something in you is clicking into place, like it just seems obvious. It makes the most sense as the next step, right? And then there are what I will call emergent choices. These are mysterious and often don't feel like decisions at all. They arise from a deep presence or synchronicity. You didn't so much as choose as you were chosen, right? Something falls into your lap, or you find yourself following a path beyond your previous self-concept. It's helpful to see choices in these ways because when you can take a step back and detach and have some names and definitions for which kind of choices you're facing, you can gain a new perspective and power over the process. You don't have to wrestle so much. You just have to slow down and listen more deeply, right? Because ultimately, in the greater universal sense, there are no wrong choices. There are only different timelines, different lessons, different life experiences. That said, of course, we are very attached to our individual lives, and some outcomes do feel very wrong, awkward, difficult, or forced because they are the challenging or challenged result of this complexity of entangled distortion, disconnection, and or very limited self-sense driven desire for a particular outcome, experience, and timeline as better or more desirable, right? So the feeling of dissatisfaction or even horror at it not turning out the way you prefer or envisioned is your inner guidance speaking in contrast and perhaps a projected fragmentation. And the longer we hobble along compensating for its weight or drag, or maybe trying to work with it or work it out or fix it or ignore it, or the louder and more urgent it gets, usually in the form of more and more complexity, possibly confusion and all pervasive awkwardness, until we finally realize that it can be simple, much simpler. Clarity and simplicity most often is the natural result of presence and a cultivated attentiveness to inner signals and outer signs, right? A seeing through of all the tangles and complications. It comes about by checking in with the body and the breath and the subtle sensations and co-relating them with the outer presentation of material reality. And this is really important, right? Perceiving them accurately. And I'm talking about both sense perception and non-perceptual extrasensory perception, right? It means asking, does this direction bring me peace? Does it align with where I want to arrive eventually, directly, or could it perhaps in a roundabout way get me there? Is my energy moving with or against itself? Does anything here feel forced or oppositional? If I imagine myself having made this choice already, how does my body respond in a few breaths? Does this move me toward or away from who I want to become? Am I avoiding pain or moving toward possibility? Does this feel like self-abandonment or self-honoring? Right? What part of me is speaking loudest right now? My fear, my ego, my intuition, my past self? If I had no fear of failure or judgment, what would I try? You could also write these questions down and come back to them over the next several days, noticing how different answers arise as your body and mind go through the many cycles it goes through, right? This will help distinguish reactive from emergent clarity. Because wanting to choose carefully isn't bad, but if that careful consideration becomes a trap of either or, this or that, and projecting potential outcomes which may not ever come to be, it diverts your attention and power from the present moment, right? That's why aligned choice also includes a letting go and trust in the great unknown, and accepting that you do have the grace and leeway to direct or redirect in each new moment. You don't have to get it perfect right off the bat. You just have to stay in relationship and communication with the feelings and the overall energy as it proceeds forward in time. Right? So what are some really practical things you can do when you don't know what to choose? Well, here's what I've learned to do in the real life chaos of confusing or heavy choices. So journaling these out is usually the best. I'm a big journaler. So first, name the fear. Like, what am I really afraid might happen? What wound is being stirred here? What memory, block, or issue am I projecting onto this? What's familiar or unfamiliar? Am I noticing any patterns here? Right? And then feel into the body. What does each option feel like somatically? Do I shrink? Do I tighten? Or do I open? What feels best or lightest? And ask yourself honestly, if I couldn't get it right, what would feel most honest to try, right? What am I curious about? What do I want to experiment with? What am I not afraid to fail at? And then choose one small step, okay? I don't have to know everything or need to figure out the whole path right now. I just need to move in the direction that feels most possible and accurate in this present moment, right? And then stay in relationship. Understand that choices aren't final. If something starts to feel off, you can make adjustments with care and consideration of what is unfolding. This is how choice becomes a practice in self-discovery and exploration in favor of evolution. You don't have to know, you have to stay in conversation with what is real inside of you, right? If something bears off course, don't freak out, just make an adjustment, learn, reconsider, and begin again. One of the great things about how our collective consciousness is evolving right now is that we are increasingly embracing the process of life more and accommodating increases in self-reflection and self-awareness in all areas of life, and honoring and elevating those who exhibit signs of insight born of this kind of practice, those who aren't ashamed of their own presence and the humble, attentive honesty to engage with corrective intervention, right? So now let's talk about how you know when you're aligned, okay? Aligned choices often feel quietly exciting and calming, even when they're sad or maybe a little scary, right? They feel supported by synchronicity or a sense of rightness. Have you ever had the experience of everything kind of arising at the same time and then seemingly coming together out of nowhere? It feels resonant and honors the emotional flavor of the passage of change unfolding, right? And allows for there to be a jumble of complexity and working out the details without judgment, right? It doesn't make wrong the potentially dysregulated or messy up in the air process of creation. Whereas misaligned choices, on the other hand, don't always feel bad or wrong. In fact, you might feel certain and plow forward with enthusiasm, but as time goes on, they tend to carry a certain kind of like grainy feeling, right? They fragment and drag your energy down. They require excess effort to maintain and often involve sloppiness or disagreement and do-overs. They stir up doubt, not the helpful kind, but the kind that distorts your conviction and certainty. And here's the paradox, right? Because there's always a paradox. Aligned choices don't always feel easy and in the flow, but they often feel clearer, even when they're uncomfortable. There's a kind of certainty and clean edge to them, a knowing, even if you're in new territory and flying blind as you follow it. So this is why nervous system awareness is part of the work, to recognize that when we're deeply triggered in fear or flooded with old survival patterns, clarity can get clouded because we're human and our physical bodies and minds have chemistry and inner processes that we can become flooded by, right? And get carried away with. So part of the practice is to create just enough stillness, right? Just enough space to pick up on the signal beneath the noise, to pause and release the energy from the body through the breath, right? To settle into the spaces between the breaths and the thoughts and the words, to really drop into the body and ask, what do I really want? What do I fear most? What if what I fear most actually comes into being, and then what? And what is beneath this? Can I hear the deeper truth and conviction speaking in a quieter voice? What if everything I deeply desire and have always wanted lies on the other side of this choice, right? Choice is a practice of attention and attentiveness and power with the process of reality creation. When you trust your capacity to choose, knowing full well that you can adjust as you go, you open up your entire life to movement and clarity and this beautiful and exciting experience of co-creation. So if you're afraid of making the wrong decision, take heart and take a breath, right? There is plenty of room to learn, lots of room to shift, and an entire field within which to become something you may not be currently able to imagine, right? So let this be your permission slip to begin, to try something new, to trust the next step, even if you aren't sure. And if you mess up or if you fail, it's okay. Learning to walk in your highest power and conviction is a continual practice. And if you made it this far in the video, you will be walking it with grace. Anugraha. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time.